Toto is just doing a song, Paul speaking with Shane.
G'day guys, how are you? Thanks for coming down. I'm sure Tracy and everybody else will do the formalities, but my name's Jeff. That's my lovely wife Karen there. Put your arm up, Kaz, in case you don't know Kaz. I'm going to do a song that I sang for Macca on his 60th birthday party in a place called Battlesticks up in Newcastle, and ironically that's where the farewell was for Macca last week. So for those people who are up there, know Battlesticks, probably a lot of you guys don't, but it's a restaurant in Newcastle. And I just found it ironic that I did that song so many years ago, and just rehearsing through the week, which was pretty tough. It just means so much more to me now, and I look at this song in a whole different light. So it's written by another Macca. It's written by Paul McCartney. So it's by Macca for Macca. And yeah, I hope you like it. You'll probably know it. If you do, you can sing along. You'll probably do better than I will. I've just got to put my packing cheeks on. When I go away, know my heart can stay with Macca. It's understood. It's in the hands of Macca. And Macca does it good. Whoa, 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 whoa. Macca does it good. And when the carpet's bare, you'll still find red wine there with Macca. It's understood. It's everywhere with Macca. And Macca does it good. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Macca does it good. Oh, Macca. Oh, Macca. Only Macca holds the other key to me. Oh, Macca. Oh, Macca. Only Macca does it good to me. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Macca does it good. Don't ever ask me why. Why never say goodbye to Macca? It's understood. It's in the hands of Macca. Macca, he does it good. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa. Macca does it good. Oh, Macca. Oh, Macca. Only Macca does it good to me. Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, whoa. I got four. Thanks, guys.
Welcome everyone. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Pleasure.
Steve loved that at his 60th and he would have really appreciated it. Probably looking down now going, oh, say. Today we're here to celebrate a life well lived at a place Steve loved and a place where we spent most weekends for the past many years. I'm overwhelmed with gratitude for the incredible love and care you have shown me during this challenging time. From the bottom of my heart, I thank each and every one of you for your messages, your calls, your flowers, the many Gold Coast visits, and unwavering support unwavering support has been a lifeline to me as I navigate my new world without Steve. And let me tell you, he would be so thankful to see you all here and know that you have been supporting his trinket. Curly and I still find it hard to comprehend a day without our groover. Steve was the life of the party, the one that brought joy, laughter wherever he went, and also a little or a lot of obnoxiousness and crass. Even in those last 7 weeks, when the challenges seemed insurmountable, he gave it a red hot go. That was just the kind of person he was. Determined, resilient, and always ready to tackle life head on. Now let's talk about Steve's style. He was the last person who would want to be incapacitated. He told many people he would never do that. But when he had to, he did. He did it in style. Long lunches were his thing, and he continued to enjoy them, even in the face of adversity. That's the spirit we all admired in him. I have to give a special shout out to Lou for encouraging me to start the chat Cheers to Steve. It turned out to be one of the best decisions of my life. Little did I know that people would come from far and wide to see him, and he so loved that. We shared countless laughs, many, many glasses of red wine, Cointreau, bourbon, whatever Stevie wanted. And we shed a few tears. But it was the most heartful and memorable send-off we could have given him. I thank you so much. And Anna Palaszczuk, I'm still waiting for the thank you for the boost in Queensland tourism. To the love of my life, my groover, Steve, I miss you with every fibre of my being. Thank you all for being here today to celebrate the incredible man I was lucky enough to love. So let's raise our glasses and toast to Steve, a true legend, a cherished friend, and forever my groover. Cheers to Steve.
Cheers.
And now I pass the mic over to you, Cole. Show us your wit, my friend. Let us keep the celebration going. Thank you. Well done.
Firstly, it's a great honour to be asked to speak today at Steve's wake in the presence of his family and friends. It's truly a sad occasion for us all. We've known each other for a long time, Steve and I, over 50 years. And there's a lot I'd like to say about him. It's quite lengthy, so I've had to write it down, I'm sorry. So those that are standing might want to find a seat. This is going to go for a while. But anyway, I'll start at the beginning. He was born Stephen Robert McCluskey on the 4th of July 1954 in the Northern Rivers town of Kempsey, New South Wales. While still an infant, his parents, Bob and Mum Junie, moved the family home to Lambton, an inner city suburb of Newcastle. Back then it was a working class suburb, heavily populated with mining families, but now fairly gentrified and highly sought after. His sister Sue followed soon after, with a bit of a gap to younger brother, Robert Jr., and a bit of everything dog named Bo that would go crazy at the sight of a tennis ball completed the family unit. His childhood was quite unremarkable. He spent his days on his push bike or with his dog exploring the old disused mine workings behind his house. He went to Lambton Primary School, played rugby league for Western Suburbs, and on Saturdays and Sundays he would catch a bus into Newcastle and spend a day at the beach. As a teenager he attended a boys only high school at Broadmeadow, but he had little interest in the rigid school system at the time, with its rules and demand for uniformity and compliance. School? Yeah, nah. Teach me to read and write and some basic maths, and I'll do the rest. Shakespeare, algebra, Big Bang and assembly lines will be useless where I'm heading. The School of People is my future. After leaving school in year 10, he got a job with the local council as an apprentice motor mechanic, which surprisingly and to his credit, he stuck at for 4 years. Got his certificate and left the very next week. Working on garbage trucks in 40-degree heat was not his idea of fun, nor what he was born to do. Ironically, he has never worked a day in that trade since. For the next few years, he bounced around a variety of jobs, mainly to support his car payments and his ever-demanding social lifestyle. These included a survey assistant, a labourer, a deckhand on a prawn trawler, a martial arts instructor, nightclub bouncer, car salesman, car yard principal, insurance salesman, and ultimately the managing director at McCluskey Insurance and Finance Brokers. The seeds of this company were originally planted by his father, Bob, who concentrated mainly on life and general insurance, and at the time was underwritten almost exclusively through MLC. He was quite successful. When Steve came on board, it was still no more than a car boot company, with narrow focus, limited portfolio, and next to no widespread visibility, relying heavily on repeat business from a loyal but ageing clientele, and shackled to a single underwriter through historical connections. He could see that for this business to survive and grow, changes had to occur, often to his father's chagrin. But the whole sector was rapidly changing, expanding both in terms of product range, access to finance, and in the use of technology. Hence, as a consequence, encouraging increased competition and threatening the existence of stagnant companies with outmoded thinking. If this company was to continue to have skin in this game, it was time to move. Continuing along the same old path he could see was not going to cut it in the new business environment, hence he started to introduce changes. Initially, this led to much headbutting between the young bull and the old bull, with the surrounding air often a bit tense. Inevitably, the future prevailed and the past slowly and stubbornly retreated, and in time, the light brightened and Bob began to see the practical and financial benefits of his son's new direction through the positive effect on the bottom line. Steve took the business out of rented premises. He bought a small yet well-positioned building in central Newcastle. He partnered up with a super efficient office manager and organiser, found good staff and set about seizing the opportunities that a growing city like Newcastle would provide, following the recent closure of the BHP. The town at the time was on the crest of a wave. Tower cranes were going up everywhere. It was the start of a long and prosperous construction boom. Over the ensuing 15 or so years, Macca and Tracy would jig and rejig the business to ensure they constantly stayed on the crest of that wave. And it worked. And the rest, dear friends, as we know, is history. As a younger bloke, Macca could always look after himself in a stoush. Back then, he was no more than a brawler with a big heart though. For every hit, there was a swing and a miss. Then he started his martial arts. He took to it immediately and it became like an obsession. Beyond normal dedication. He was training 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a week, and for years and years, from late teens to late 20s. His mentor, Gary, himself a black belt, took him under his wing, and from that time on, his improvement was rapid. He always had strength through his gymnastics and sport, but what Gary developed in him were to become his 2 greatest attributes, speed and power. He became cobra quick and brutally hurtful. Up until he got his black, most, if not all of his sparring was within the confines of his own club. And he would always hold back, not wanting to hurt his club mates, while at the same time encouraging their attack in order to hone his defensive skills. But every now and then, sending a sharp reminder that he was always in control. Unsurprisingly, in a relatively short amount of time after he attained his black belt, he was competing in and winning tournaments both nationally and internationally. He indeed had become world class. He was that good. In addition to his martial arts ability, Macca was a state-level gymnast, which accounts for his powerful physique, a representative swimmer, a keen surfer and an excellent water skier, and a black diamond snow skier. He was also a foundation member of the hard drugs, soft snow, casual sex ski team. A motley group of civic-minded young fellas established to provide an important community service for the romantic and adventurous. Over a 20-year period, late teens to late 30s, Macca was embedded in the Newcastle nightlife scene. Unless he was away every Wednesday through Sunday, he was out at one of the several venues in town. Monday and Tuesday were for recovery. His nights would start usually at a pub, either the Bel Air or the Star. Those from Newcastle know what I'm talking about. Then once they shut, it was either the Castle, Fanny's, Ziggy's or Lloyd's until 3 a.m. Routine for year on year on year. He knew all the club owners and they knew him. He would rarely have to pay the door charge, as being such a regular, they knew that he and his mates would more than cover the entry fee many times over across the bar through the course of the night. With the added bonus of an extra bit of security should Harry the Goose or Billy the Goat turn into cockhead through the night and require a lesson in good manners. Yet he never saw trouble. His reputation was enough to ensure he hardly had to raise a hand. We're also to learn many years later from a detective friend of ours that used to patrol the nightclub scene that Steve's name was on a list marked "handled with care." All words to that effect. Besides, many of the doormen he knew personally and had trained, so it was a nod and a wink and we'd skip the line and in we go. There were benefits to being connected back then. In the late 70s we worked together at the Port Waratah coal loader project, which was conveniently located close to his hunting ground, the Newcastle nightlife strip. He could go out the night before, then drive his combi to the work site and crash there overnight, where I'd bang on the side to wake him up when I arrived in the morning. Out he'd stumble after an hour or two sleep, buck naked, looking like shit, followed sheepishly by his guest du jour, shoes in hand, clothes a mess, makeup and hair looking like she'd been ravaged by the devil himself. Like a good wingman, I'd take $10 out of his wallet, call her a cab and hand him a can of Coke. For the 2-year life of that project, that's generally how our day would start on average at least twice a week, sometimes with the same guest. Riding on the company's success, Macca ensured that he and Tracy enjoyed both life and a work-life balance, the envy of us all. He was well ahead of the curve in implementing and practicing work-life balance and work-from-home initiatives, long before they became the thing. What's more, he was doing in his 40s what most of us had to wait until our 50s and 60s to do, until we had both the time and the means to live the dream and ride the rainbow. It was almost as if he had a premonition that old age was not going to be an issue. Although he worked only to live, he was also savvy enough to realise the better you did it, the more you got to enjoy. Lifestyle was their return on investment and their raison d'etre. His whole life had become a metaphor for success. The success was accelerated once he met Tracy. In Tracy, he found a life partner that was not only an astute businesswoman and lifestyle organiser, but also a physically attractive, stylish and elegant social companion that more than adequately complemented his own social standing. In short, they looked good and they worked good together. His appetite for a good time was insatiable. He was gregarious, extroverted, indefatigable and highly entertaining. In the words of one of his favourites, Billy Joel, Macca would rather laugh with the sinners than cry with the saints. It was so easy to get swept along by his infectious enthusiasm because you knew it always led to episodes of laughter and good times. Glass half full and hangovers be damned. He had no time for gloom and misery. It was full speed ahead on the joie de vivre. Throughout his life, he had always been a beacon of fun for his many, many friends, consciously ignoring the frowns and protestations of the wowsers and the fun police. At gatherings, he was usually the first to arrive and the last to leave. And in between, he would put away enough alcohol to cripple a mule and yet appear only to be barely affected. What always rankled me the most was that in the morning he would emerge, showered and shaved and ready for breakfast, while the rest of us would fill would feel like we'd been beaten with a cricket bat and eaten a cat turd. Yet despite all his achievements, Macca has always been a man of humble demeanour and modest taste. He never one to flaunt the trappings of his success. His austerity was legendary. His self-deprivation served an example to us all. His philosophy on life was simple. His creed, just give me water. Oh, and throw in a 60-foot sports cruiser, a classy uptown girl, and a barrel of wine. And we can all now get a sense of how he punished himself. Poor fellow was cruelly ensconced in the prison of human suffering. Now, Stevie may not have been everybody's cup of tea, but he was certainly their glass of red, bourbon and coke, or Cointreau and ice. And if that wasn't your suit, he would generally offer you la beer. One lesson you get to learn very early in your relationship with Macca is that when out in a restaurant, you never, ever, ever let him anywhere near the wine list. Otherwise, that humble $20 pizza or spag bowl would be washed down with half a dozen bottles of $80 Pyrus or VAT something Billionaire's Reserve, and the ensuing bill shot would keep you at home for the next fucking month. Oddly enough, Macca could do just as much, if not more damage to someone without being physical. So you want to play A grade, eh? He'd say with a smile and a glint in his eye, we'll see. And from that point on, the gauntlet thrown, the duel accepted, his weapon of choice, red wine. After about half a dozen bottles, most would submit and look to get away while they could still walk. At this point, he was just warming up. The brave, or rather foolish ones, hung around for another couple of bottles, which would usually see their demise. If not, Cointreau and tequila shooters. Bam, game over. For years, Club Macca was an institution at the southern end of Lake Macquarie. Whether as a base for water skiing or boating, or just a hangout for the weekend, always note to self, always check the date on the milk and how long that shriveled up pizza had been there. That was before Tracy. The parties were legendary. Whether birthdays, New Year's, Christmas Eve, Grand Final, State of Origin, St. Patrick's, anybody else's birthday, straight or themed, we celebrated them all. It was an ideal location for a party. The music was always loud and pumping, the alcohol free-flowing, the crowd rowdy but friendly, and the celebrations protracted well into the following morning. The invitees were the usual suspects and their friends, and the condition of entry was the standard, bring what you drink plus a contribution to the bar. Dress code was flexible, in summer, mandatory minimal, in winter, whatever. For those that couldn't make it home, accommodation was on the lounge, on the floor, on your boat, in the car, on the lawn, or wherever you dropped and were last seen. In the morning there was egg and bacon rolls with barbecue sauce and lots of snakes. Coffee or hair of the dog for the brave. In those early days it was quite often a lot like ancient Rome meets Lake Macquarie. Growing up, all our kids were critters. He loved having them around and they loved him back. Whether we were out on the boats or at Club Macca, it was no different. He had a lot of cool toys and tech stuff and lots of snakes, and he'd never say, no you can't. Way cooler than Mum and Dad. And importantly, he taught them all the useful adjectives of the English language, ready for school life by the time they were 5. When he was charged up and on a roll. Unvarnished, unfiltered, and definitely unapologetic. Parents would cringe and kids would giggle and smirk. It was so much fun being in his orbit then. And no mate, you can't put an 8-year-old to sleep with a bourbon and coke. I don't think, and no, I'm not going to try. Despite his limited formal education, Steve was a highly intelligent man. He would ensure he was well informed both through print and electronic media regarding important topical and cultural issues locally, nationally and internationally. His arguments were grounded on proper facts, figures and common sense, and his opinions were advanced with the usual McCluskey bias, which always made for robust discussion. And if you disagree, you're obviously fucking wrong. Like most small business owners, he'd moan about the amount of tax he had to pay, the ineptitude of government, and the difficulty of finding good staff, conveniently forgetting what a slack-ass employee he used to be. His political leanings were distinctly to the right of centre. The Labor Party was a disguised criminal organisation, and the Greens a balloon with the air sucked out. In all our time together, I've never known him to be a wannabe, a facsimile, an imitation. He was an original, comfortable in his own skin. Nor have I observed him as a hypocrite. He'd always been true to himself and to his principles, and had the courage and conviction to own what he says or how he acts, no matter how much it may displease or disaffect others. Yet quick to apologise and make amends if found out of line. From the early get-go, he made a life out of defying the norm, taking up the challenge, beating the odds, sneering at convention, and always setting the dial at 11. And no one did it better. Never one to waste time virtue signalling, stroking egos, or fearing treading on toes. He would say it straight, regardless. He could read the room, and he could talk, and he could work a room, as he often did. Juxtaposing the words of the children's rhyme, when he was good, he was very, very good. But when he was bad, he was better. He was the best example of what a friend should be. Selfless, generous in nature, non-judgmental, loyal, and lots of fucking fun. The other night up at Newcastle, I called him a unicorn, a one-off, a class act. Even from a young age, Steve always had a curious nature and an inquiring mind, always keen to explore what was over there. This outlook has inspired his many and varied travels to 5 of the 6 habitable continents of the world, including the multitude of countries, regions, cities and villages lying within each. His eyes have seen sights that most people can only dream of, imagine or experience through media. He has sailed the world's oceans, flown the world's skies, cruised great rivers, lazed on tropical islands. He has stood atop mountains, trekked across glaciers, gazed on great waterfalls, canyons and gorges, seen deserts and jungles, big cities and small villages. He has met people of all walks of life and culture, people of great influence, captains of industry, movers and shakers, peasants and paupers, and everyday regular folks like us. He has embraced and touched us all as friends, and in doing so, has enriched our lives. He asks nothing in return other than the warmth of our friendship. Without question, he really has had a fortunate life, but a life cut too short at 69. Yet ultimately, a life once completing its tenure also had a poignant and fitting end, drawing his final breath with only Tracy and Curly by his side. Personal, private, his way. So now in closing, Stevie, as we formally bid you goodbye, dear friend, know that your memory will forever live in our hearts. The memory of your laughter, the sound of your voice, the witty comebacks, the sarcastic one-liners, Harry the Goose, Cockhead, and all the fun times we shared shall give us strength and solace until the time when we raise a glass again together on the other side. Valets Stephen Robert McCluskey, forever rest in peace. Cheers, Macca.
Thanks, Don. You said it perfect. I've known Macca just on 45 years or so, and in those years, as Cole said, we frequently went to nightclubs in Newcastle, bars, all over the place, and we enjoyed it. He was a true friend to all of us. In the early years, he played we enjoyed a lot of things together. Snow skiing, water skiing. He was just a great guy and a great mate. The last 20 years or so, as you know down here, I've only known you guys probably 8 or 10 years. But we spent a lot of time with Macca and Tracy. Weekends, holidays, Lake Macquarie, Bidwater, all over the east coast of Australia, and also overseas, with Kimberleys, And Macca was always there. He was always full of fun. Anyway, we all know he was so generous, and he's quick wit, he's one-liners, he's laughing. There was never a dull moment. But in those 20 years, I've got to mention a few of the little things he made us laugh even more. And just his one-liners. I remember rafted up in Lake Macquarie many years ago, and a mate of ours decided to come out with a bowl of nuts or whatever. Anyway, Macca's standing there, and our mate offers him the nuts, and he just had one look at it. He picked the bowl up, walked over the side of the boat, and threw it over the side. He just looked back and he said, "I didn't crawl to the top of the food chain to be eating this fucking food seed." He always enjoyed his food. After a number of years in Lake Macquarie, Steve would treat us to beautiful weekends. He'd always put on a big beef, big Brutus he used to call it. He'd go down to the local butchers and get it cut up and split. And then he'd cook this beef for 2.5 hours. And I must admit, there was a few of us in the room that had experienced it. Magga and Tracy would entertain anything up to about 10 people on the back of their boat. We'd be sitting there, out come the white wine and the red wine, and it just flowed on. His generosity was incredible, but he loved it. He loved cooking this piece of meat every time we went out. Then we went, over the years, we rafted up a few times with Magga, and he'd always come out with his one-liners and so on. But one of the things he thought he was good at was navigation. It was one of his, he thought he was good at it. Anyway, one weekend he rings me up, he said, "Where are you?" I said, "Oh, in the lake." He said, "Good, can you come down and pick us up?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you've got a rope." Anyway, he'd gone out the night before, missed the marker, and went straight up on the point at Mark's Point. They stayed there the whole night because the tide was low, so he must have hit it pretty hard. So when I got round there, there's a marine rescue dragging him off. He then bought a Rib 360, and he loaded it up with the best electronics and GPS, everything on it, radar. Again, we're rafted up, there's three of us. Macca's got the centre position. Anyway, the wind started to blow up. Macca decides, well look, let's just pick the anchor up and we'll motor over beyond the island over there. I said, well that's good, well let's break away. He said, oh no, he said, don't have to do that. I said, oh sure. He said, mate, I said, I've got the best avionics, everything on this boat. Burns are all on, and he's telling us how good this chart and his radar is going to be. Well, we hit the biggest marker in Lake Macquarie. And he jammed it between the two boats. Well, and mate looked at him and he said, hang on, Macca, you just told us this navigation was fantastic. He just looked back and he said, we know boats. Another time we were on the lake, down at Macca and Tracy's place on Valentine's Day. Tracy comes out with this big Brutus. Yeah, boys, put this in the barbecue. So Macca and I light the barbecue up and get it rolling. Things are going great guns. Barbie's nice and warm. Anyway, Tracy comes out about 2 hours later. So we're just about ready to serve. How's the meat going? Well, we lifted the lid. There was nothing inside. Macca just looked back at me and he said, mate, we're in the shit here. He said, we threw the meat in, of course, 2 hours later on, we're all shit-faced. We didn't know what we were going to eat, but anyway, I'm surprised Tracy didn't chill Macca then. We went out for lunch or dinner with Steve, who, of course, he never did it in half. As Cole just said, never give him the wine list. And as we know, you always knew you had a good night with Macca because your credit card was bouncing down the road the next morning. And there's plenty of people here that would cringe every time Macca got the wine list. Over those years, he used to ring me and he'd say to me, it's a luncheon on down at the Bonnells Bay Hotel, wine and drink. And I said, oh yeah, okay. Every 3 to 6 months he'd ring me, and I don't know why, but anyway, we went down there and we'd always have a great session. We'd be entertained by some staff from Penfolds or Henschke, and of course Stevie loved his red wine. And we used to leave a lovely, generous tip, but we always came home with half a truckload of red wine. He loved doing it, loved it every minute. Down here, you know how patient Macca is. He, well, I'll tell you one. We were down here one weekend, we tied up together down in Jerusalem Bay. And Macca said, "Can you give us a hand to get the tender in the water?" I said, "Yeah, not a problem." Anyway, lower the tender in the water. He used to keep the outboard underneath the back of his boat. So gives him a hand to lift the outboard on and we put it on the tender. Macca tightens it all up, gets hold of the starboard cable and goes to pull it. Of course, the outboard's seized. I thought, oh shit, hang on Macca, I'll go and get a plug spanner and some WD-40. Off I go. I turned around, here's Macca undoing the outboard. So what are you doing? Just picked it up and he dropped it in the drink. So anyone navigating through Jerusalem Bay, I always keep on the eastern side. Then Steve's love affair with his Jenny.
Far out.
He used to run 24/7, didn't matter. He loved the air conditioning running, he couldn't handle the heat. He used to run all the time. But I pity the poor bastards. Yeah. Come home one weekend, Sunday night, off he goes, locks the boat down, goes home. Comes back a week later, the Jenny's still running. So anyone sleeping on their boat that week must have went to sleep with their earplugs in. Another weekend, he just got back from the Gold Coast and he had a new generator fitted. He's failed. Anyway, he's been back a couple of days and all of a sudden the genset stops. With Macca, he didn't like that because he decon and stuff. So straight away he goes down the engine room. Next minute hearing swearing and carrying on, he comes out and he's got hot air blowing out of his ears everywhere and he's just about on fire. I looked at his hands and he's got oil from arsehole to breakfast time. The genset had drained out the whole.
It's water.
Should have been contract.
Anyway, Macca come out of the engine room disgusted because his brand new genset he's bet a fortune on had died. The lifeblood of the engine had ended up in his bilge. And as Cole said, he didn't like oil, didn't like cleaning anything up. That was Macca. Anyway, we spent the next day cleaning it. About 20 years ago, we went skiing in Japan with him. And on the way over, Macca and a few others went a day early and got the accommodation. Anyway, myself and about 18 others arrived the next day. We got this coach up from Sapporo up to Nisiko. Anyway, on the way up, there's a guy in the bus, a retired magistrate from Victoria. He was a real stroppulous person and kept asking these stupid questions. Anyway, time he got there, it took about 2 hours. We all had a belly full of this guy. We get to the reception area, they're handing out who's staying with who. You had to partner up with someone in those rooms. And of course, this poor bastard got Macca. We all looked at each other and knew him and said, Macca will kill this guy. Anyway, we go out for dinner that night. And as everyone knows, who went out with Macca, you just count the heads at the end of the night, and that's you split the bill up. Macca, booked up, a few bottles of red wine and a few other bits and pieces. Of course, gets to his bunk buddy, and he said, "No, I'm not paying that." Well, Macca just said, "Well, that's what we do." That was a bad move by the magistrate. Anyway, he had the shits. Macca had the shits too. Next morning, of course, the magistrate disappears. Anyway, we're out in the ski slabs and hearing, "Mr. Steve McCluskey, please go back to your accommodation." Anyway, of course, Macca goes back. Here's the police. The magistrate had died. True story. A few of us here will back me up. So what we thought, Macca must have done something wrong. The police interviewed him, of course, and they couldn't speak English, and Macca couldn't speak Japanese. So Macca said, well, not much I can say. Anyway, poor bastard had a heart attack in the onset, went down for an early dip. But we got some good yardage out of that. Because I'm sure in the middle of the night we heard, someone fighting for their life. But anyway. On the same trip, we went skiing, Macca, John and myself, in this beautiful run, about 2 foot of powder. Poor Macca, when we first got there, wouldn't try the big fat skis on, which makes your skiing a bit easier. He was on these skinny boards. Well, he followed us down into this valley. Of course, we did about 20 or 30 turns into it, then realised there's no way out. We had to walk out. Macca back then was smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. Well, by the time we walked out this side of this hill, about half an hour later, we sit at the top, John and I. And Macca finally comes out. I thought it would have killed him, but he was red as a beetroot. He was swearing a lot. Said, who thought of this idea? And his grit and his determination was exactly who the guy was. In the last few weeks of his life, we saw it. He was his determination. He did it his way, and I think it's a proud day for all of us to understand how Steve was. He had a lot of determination. He was a great friend to all of us. Thank you very much, Steve, and Trinket. Thank you. Yes, Steve.
Now for the X-rated version. I think I pretty much know most people here, but for those fortunate enough not to know me, my name is Tom Muir, and Tracy's honoured me today by asking me to say a few words about Steve, aka Macca, aka Groover. I've been tasked to deliver not a formal eulogy with facts, details and dates, but more of a reflection of the memorable and often humorous times that I spent with Steve and some of his stories he shared with me, I'm sure with many others here today. I'm privileged to say that Steve has been a close friend for the last 9 or 10 years, which I know is not a long time when compared to his many mates from Newcastle, who he always spoke of so fondly and who formed the subject matter of many of his stories, particularly from his bachelor days. In my defence, however, I'd venture to say that there'd be very few people who have spent more time with Steve in those last 9 or so years. As my wife Lou and I have enjoyed numerous holidays, both domestically and overseas, trips up and down the coast, the boats, always at 21 knots of course, it's only speed, and countless weekends in and around Pittwater on the boats. I would often joke that the McCluskeys were doing their best to send me broke organising our holidays. Indeed, I'm probably the person most responsible for Steve and Tracy becoming such a fixture on the northern beaches of Sydney, as I first met them at a dinner on the Gold Coast put on by Mark Riley, actually, at a boating festival, and which I was attending with an old mate, Matt King. Steve and Tracy automatically assumed we were gay lovers, and which of course was ridiculous because Matt's not my type. I returned home telling my wife Lou that I'd met a couple which I'm sure she would get on well with, because they were both dog tragics just like her. 2 months later we ran into each other at the Sydney Boat Show. We had lunch, drinks, dinner and more drinks, and experienced that phenomenon which became known in Pittwater as getting McCluskey. I understand the Newcastle version was known as getting knackered. But it was amazing that no matter how much had been drunk or how late he retired to bed, Steve would always manage to get up, as he would say, at the crack of 10. Anyway, our friendship ensued and we introduced them to many friends on the northern beaches and the Royal Muddy Yacht Club. However, not surprisingly, knowing Steve and Tracy, they were the ones who were introducing us to many friends they and we've made in and around Pittwater. Now, I should have prefaced my remarks today by making an apology, as I may utter the occasional profanity in the next little while, but it's difficult to talk of Macca without remembering his many expressions which one can only associate with him. For example, until I met Steve, I was unaware that there were so many cockheads in this world. Or that apparently the appropriate way to deal with such a person was to rip off their head and shit down their throat. And of course, often linked to the sighting of a cockhead was Harry the Goose, who was probably intent on knocking the back out of some attractive female, as Steve would say. Nor did I appreciate how it was possible to incorporate the phrase head job into almost every sentence in any conversation. And of course, during an evening singing and dancing, it was de rigueur to play Steve's favourite song, Give Me Head, by the Radiator. It was the only song I ever heard him sing where he seemed to know all the lyrics. Perhaps Steve's fascination with this particular activity might have had its genesis in Steve's teenage years when he worked at the local drive-in picture theatre, taking snacks, drinks and burgers around the cars. Steve told me the story that at one panel van, a chap called him over and asked if he could get a free burger if his girlfriend would do Steve, shall I say, a favour. Well, Steve knew a good deal when he heard one, and that burger was passed over at the speed of light. It's so pleasing and a real tribute to see so many people last week and here to not only share in the grief of Steve's passing, but to celebrate a life which, although cut too short at the age of 69, was nevertheless well lived and filled with many happy times. Now that's a good segue into a poem I'd like to share with you. It's called The Dash by Linda Ellis. It goes like this. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of his birth and spoke of the following date with tears. But he said that what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that he spent on earth. And now only those who loved him know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the home, cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's real and true and always try to understand the way other people feel and be less quick to anger, show appreciation more and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that the special dash might only last a while. So when your eulogy is being read, with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say, how you spent your dash? Well, I think it's fair to say that Steve spent his dash pretty well. In a fulfilling life, with more highs and achievements that most people could only wish for in one lifetime. One of his major achievements, of course, as we've heard, was to develop a successful insurance business based in Newcastle. I'm sure there are many people here today who utilise the services of McCluskey Insurance. Steve looked after his staff very well and was always available to his clients to offer free advice when needed. Away from his working life, Steve was an accomplished water skier, snow skier, and used his skills both domestically and on many trips overseas. In fact, in one unexpected development, he and old mate Jimmy Bradstreet, whilst on a stopover at Club Med Tahiti, happened to have a water ski at the resort, which not only resulted in them showing up the local instructors by barefooting backwards and forwards and so forth, but led to an offer to run the water ski school for the next week or so. Steve considered this a real bonus because it not only provided free room and board, but a ready means to meet a host of female guests. What with all that water skiing and such, I understand it was a very exhausting week for the two boys. Actually, there's a corollary to that story because I was speaking to Jimmy Bradstreet last week, and he told me that on that trip, he and Macca somehow, and he cannot explain how they did it, they smuggled a girl on the plane from LA to Tahiti. As it turned out, she was a member of the touring group for the Rolling Stones and gave them t-shirts, which Jimmy still has. I'm not sure if Steve has either. Sort of reminds me of another story. One day I was speaking to Steve and I was telling him about a 2-week cruise I did with some mates some years ago, with 3 mates, cruising up the Queensland coast. And one night after a few drinks, a conversation got around to how many sexual partners we had had. Well, for three of us, it was somewhat limited as we married relatively young and we're still happily on our first marriage.
Good answer. Good answer.
Lou, you notice I said happily. Yeah. However, in the case of our fourth member, who I'll call just Michael, he was on his third marriage and apparently had been pretty active before, perhaps during, and in between marriages. Well, Michael guesstimated that a conquest figure of 80 to 100 would be about right for him. Well, Steve's immediate response was, only 100? Of course, we're talking about pre-Tracy days here. As we've heard, Steve also excelled at martial arts, reaching the pinnacle of his endeavour through representing Australia at the Full Contact World Championships in Kuala Lumpur when he was in his 20s. Steve did tell me that the experience didn't exactly end as planned, as he came up against the Russian world champion, who was a major obstacle between the Australian team and reaching the finals. Well, Steve was sent in with riding instructions to take out the Russian, which he duly did with gusto, but unfortunately using an illegal move, which took the Russian out for the rest of the tournament, but Steve was then disqualified for the rest of the tournament as well. He was always willing to take one for the team. In a similar vein, but paltry by comparison, I can tell you about the occasion when a Finska match was underway on one of the many beaches, people know this story already, on one of the beaches around Pitwood and Broken Bay where these Finska matches would often take place with the girls versing the boys. On this particular occasion, Steve thought he could distract the girls' team from their winning throw by doing a nudie run across the playing area. The crowd was somewhat amused to see Steve's bare white bottom running away and jumping over the Finska pins before suddenly disappearing behind a large rock. But the crowd's amusement quickly turned to shock when Steve thought it was a good idea to run back face forward towards the gathered throng and to retrieve his clothes. Steve did actually have an accomplice in that nudie run, but I won't mention any names because I wouldn't want Darch to be embarrassed. Earlier this year, the McCluskeys, the Rogers and the Muellers took a road trip to Benalla in Victoria to attend some birthday celebrations for Rosie Inglis. And Steve and I spent many hours in the same car as our wives decided it was a good idea to do their version of Thelma and Louise, or more correctly, Tracy and Louise without the tragic ending. And during that time, Steve and I talked about his life growing up in Newcastle and the many things he had done over the last 50 years of adulthood. One experience which was not a highlight for him was the accommodation I organised at the Jugiong Motel, which was about the halfway mark between here and Manila. Steve and Tracy resolved that day to never let me arrange a holiday or accommodation again. But personally, I couldn't see the problem. But for some reason, Steve didn't enjoy the feeling of the bed springs through the mattress, a shower faucet with the flow of an old man with a prostate problem, or the rattling air conditioner in the window which worked like an asthmatic kid blowing at you through a straw. Steve certainly enjoyed better things in life. By now you may have developed a picture of Steve's bachelor days and a life well lived. So during that car trip I just mentioned, I asked Steve whether he ever regretted settling down. His immediate response was to say that meeting and marrying Trinket, as he called Tracy, was the best thing he ever did in his life. When Steve met Tracy, she was acting as his travel agent, and he thought she was pretty hot and elegant, and Tracy thought he was, quote, obnoxious, unquote. In fact, Tracy even complained to management about having to do his travel planning, although his old credit card was a bonus. Notwithstanding her initial impressions, since then Tracy has been by Steve's side in business and in pleasure, and without her organisation, particularly of holidays and social events, Steve would have been lost, many of us as well. Indeed, Tracy's dedication to caring to Steve in those final weeks, in very difficult and challenging circumstances, was absolutely amazing to witness, a true testament to the love they shared. When I think of Steve and his many attributes, the one thing that stands out for me was he was one of the most generous people I've met. Steve would share anything he had with you, and if he didn't have it, he would try to get it for you. When it was time that a bottle of red would be finished on the McCluskey boat, myself or somebody else would have to go and get another one. Steve would sit you down and say, don't worry, I have another 11 of those where that one came from. And of course, allied to his great generosity was Steve's sense of hospitality, always welcoming to one and all to join him on his beloved montage. Steve only had one rule when he boarded his boat, and that was don't touch my switches, my bitches or my clears. but everything else was there to be shared with you. But to offer a truly balanced view, I think it's fair to say that Steve did have a good temper, didn't suffer fools gladly, and nor did he appreciate being taken advantage of. It reminds me of a story that actually hasn't been told today, when he was at Jackson Hole, America, and Steve was having a great time at the bar and shouting shots with all his friends, and another guy thought he'd come over and join in the festivities, and Steve looked at him and said, you know, fuck off, find your own friends. Well, it was later pointed out that the guy who told him to F off was Kevin Costner. Another example was one day in Towlers Bay, when quite a few friends had gathered back on Mirage, and one very inebriated couple, who may have spoken to one of our party on the beach, arrived on Mirage to join the goings-on.
Can't.
I think I might as well again. Anyway, everyone assumed they were friends of one of our group, but they arrived empty-handed and with a very large and wet dog, and all three proceeded to make a nuisance of themselves, with the wife even falling overboard. Well, Steve asked around to finally determine that they were essentially gate crashers. So Steve did what no one else was prepared to do, and was quick to confront them and told them to, quote, fuck off and get off my boat. His clear instructions left little room for interpretation. None of us were worried, because us tough guys from the northern beaches, upon the faintest hint of any violence, always had Steve's back, and that's exactly where you would find us, right behind his back. Just like another occasion when we were involved in a three-way raft up in the basin, involving the McCluskeys, the Schultzes and the Muirs, and Steve decided that a large yacht, which had picked up the mooring behind us, was too big and too close. Well, Steve's solution was to lean out and simply unhook the mooring rope, leaving the yacht to float away, with two blokes on board. Due to the fact that there was very little wind, it took some time for the yacht to even move at all, while the Schultzes and the Muirs were carrying in my saloon, waiting for the inevitable fight. Well, it took at least 15 to 20 minutes for the guys to realise they had moved, or something was wrong, and with somewhat perplexed looks on their face, they started the motor and chuffed off home. Stevie got away with it yet again. It would be possible to stand here and talk about the many stories in Steve's life for a very long time. And it's a great tragedy that Steve is no longer with us to give us the opportunity to create new stories. So today, as we say farewell to Steve, we should remember him as a devoted, loving husband to Tracy, father to Curly, a long time and generous friend to many, and in addition to all that, generally a top bloke. That's pretty much all I have to say, but I can't finish without thanking a couple of people on behalf of Tracy for their generosity and assistance in adding to this day and last week's celebration of Steve's life in Newcastle. The first person is Phil Jackson, Phil, who generously agreed to make the life-size image of Steve. I was actually worried that Steve's image may not have survived the Newcastle event last week, with all these old mates hanging on to him and leaning on him all afternoon and having photos taken and so on. In fact, I had to intervene to stop Steve accompanying us late last Friday night to the pub and then to a whiskey bar, where one of Steve's mates was even prepared to pay an extra cover charge to get him in. The second person I want to thank is Chris Lee, who's doing the video here today. He volunteered his time to put together the audio files and photos you'll be seeing in just a moment. And I understand the video Chris is doing is going to be available on his YouTube channel in due course, so you'll be able to see all this again if you want to, or tell your friends who can't be here. So to give Chris a bit of a free play, I would highly recommend employing his services at Peninsula Funerals, should you ever feel like dying. Also, once again, on behalf of Tracy, just to thank, there's a few people who've travelled long distances. I think first prize goes to Billy and Leah Plug, who've come all the way from Perth. Simon Driscoll's flown down from Cairns. We have Bruce and Julie Morgan and John Stevens, who flew down from Hamilton Island to be here. And of course we have people from Queensland, Braden and Paddy Winch, and also the Yes, Shazam Pete and Noel. Yes, and Noel, yes. And then of course there's, that's about, most of the people travel major distance. Oh, Rosie from Denell, how can I forget that? Yeah. And of course there's the Muirs who came all the way from Church Point. So that's me to sign off. But the last thing I'd like to do is just to thank on behalf of all of us, Tracy, for putting on 2 great events and certainly unleashing the purse strings so that we can celebrate Steve's life the way I know he truly would have appreciated. Yep.
You'll tell me when to sunset and always there a song you just can't wait to share. Yeah, I know you'll tell me when I get there. Yeah, I think of you when I think about forever.
We're out on the water when I see your boat again. Remember that day when I went, oh, I know that red joke, yeah. And I looked it up with me, I went, of course. Oh, no. Ready, turn around. George and Manasaka's one of Steve's great mates. I'm going to go and do some stuff with
Go do your thing.
you.